Hello, everybody. Thank you for visiting my YouTube channel once again. This is the place where we discuss the Lord's Recovery Movement of Witness Lee, also known as the local church movement. It's also a place where we try to expand the discussion to larger issues and show connections and implications and try to learn something new. What I'm going to talk about today is something I've never really talked about, and that is how the Lord's Recovery aligns itself with leftism and Islam. Now, that might come as a shock to some of you, but I'm going to make that case today. Now, what you have to see, essentially, is the tension in humanity and in the world, and metaphysically, I guess, between the individual and the group. This is kind of a mystery and something I think we've all thought about a little bit. What is the individual's relationship to the group, and what is the group's relationship to the individual? And who's really in charge of final decisions, and how should the individual behave toward the group and think toward the group and deal with the group and cooperate with the group? And how should the group feel about the individual? Really, this all comes down to how you view the individual. The group, in a sense, is kind of an abstract. It's not something that really exists, it's just a phenomenon. Whereas an individual actually exists, because the group could be a club, a group could be the people at your job, a group could be a community, a city, a state, a nation, the whole world, and the group can be a church. In the Lord's Recovery, they really emphasize this issue of the church and what the church means and how central it is to God's purpose. And what Watchman Nee and Witness Lee really did is they shifted the focus of the Christian Commission away from the Great Commission of spreading the gospel and focused it on building the church. Now, the building of the church is very important. But strictly speaking, the Bible does not commission us to build the church. And this was something that Witness Lee and Watchman Nee created as the main emphasis. God certainly wants to build the church. The problem is we don't really know what that is or what that really ultimately looks like. Really, building the church, in my view, is just all the members being built up and then being in cooperation. And you see the fruit of that through the way the church has changed each individual in their behavior and in their interaction with each other. But Watchman Nee and Witness Lee made it the central focus and what we have to be focused on. And I don't believe that's really biblical. God builds the church, but our commission is to build up people, to build up other individuals, either by helping them become Christians or helping them grow as Christians, or both. It's really that simple with me. So the group, though we need groups and we need to cooperate with groups sometimes, the group itself is not the point. And groups change, they grow, they become obsolete, they go away. Churches come and churches go. Groups grow and then they shrink. But the reality of the church as a ideal and a universal reality exists. We should be willing to cooperate with any Christian who is well-meaning and who aligns with our views of the faith and so forth. We shouldn't worry about what denomination they're in or what their interpretation of the Bible is, except for extreme error. But generally speaking, we're supposed to try to cooperate, love, receive, and break bread with other Christians. We're not supposed to cut ourselves off from them. But that doesn't mean we have to meet with them every week or even have a close relationship with them. We are just simply supposed to be Christians. We are supposed to get together and rely on each other for help and all that kind of stuff. But the idea that we need to build up this institution, I don't believe is biblical. The church is a spiritual reality. It's not something that we should focus on in the sense of building up a practical institution. So where am I going with this? Well, the Lord's Recovery is a collectivist organization. It is an organization that uplifts the group and downplays the individual. The Lord's Recovery sacrifices the sanctity of the individual and treats the individual as a means to an end for achieving their stated goal. And so it's very collectivist. And collectivism is always based in a false view of the group and the individual. In the world today, we have Western civilization competing with two major factions. Leftism, which includes communism and socialism, and also atheism to a large degree, and Islam, which is a competing religion and one that is not really in any essential way a parallel of Christianity. It's very different. Both of these groups are collectivist. Both of them downplay the individual. The individual is a means to an end. The individual must always submit to the group. The individual must always be one with the group, and so forth and so on. And we know this is a Lord's Recovery cornerstone, that the individual exists for the group, that the individual must try to be one with the group, that the group has the right to ostracize and denounce an individual that doesn't do those things. That is a very collectivist view. And in the world politically, it's a threat. It's a threat to the church, this collectivist view, because it kills the opportunity for someone to make a change. This is the problem with the Lord's Recovery. They resist change and they condemn anybody who tries to change them. But that goes against what we see in the Bible. We see in the Bible over and over and over again the group going off track and some individual coming in and trying to set them straight. And that individual isn't always an official leader. The prophets weren't. They just were raised up by God and they stepped in and they would say whatever they felt that God wanted them to say to straighten people out. They would even speak directly to kings and rebuke them. They would rebuke the leaders. They would rebuke the religious leaders. In a democracy, when we have free speech, it works the same way. People have a right to speak out. And all collectivist groups suppress free speech. The Islamists suppress it, the leftists suppress it, and the Lord's Recovery suppresses it. They want the group to dominate. And I find this very interesting because this is what I see in the world. I see freedom and freedom of speech, the sanctity of the individual, the value of the individual in the eyes of God, all being compromised by this collectivist view. Now, does that believe I don't believe in groups? No, it doesn't mean I don't believe in groups. We need groups. Like I said, there are all kinds of groups, and we need to sometimes cooperate with them. But we're not there for the group. We're not there for the sake of the group. Now, you might view yourself as, I'm here for others, but that's a completely different thing than being there for the group. You have to see the difference. You're talking about other individuals. You're not talking about some group. You're not talking about some ideology. You're not talking about some movement. You're talking about people. It's about people, as individuals. And this is the Lord's Recovery's error. If you trace it down to the example of group and individual, the essential and first example of a group, that would be the triune God, the Father, Son, and Spirit. It is a group and it is three individuals and it is one being. But if you look at how it is, we know that Orthodox theology says all three are God and all three are equal. Even the Lord's Recovery mentions this. The Father, the Son, and the Spirit are co-equal. None stands above the rest. But in that group, they each have slightly different roles. Okay, and we know what those are. So the point I'm trying to make is this is, to me, the model of groups and individuals in the world and in our lives and in the church. You are a member of a group and you have a role, but no one individual is really above the other or better than the other. And I think this is the example that we should follow. And it's a mystery. It's really a mystery because it's the Trinity. It's something we can't quite understand, and yet You have to avoid this extreme of saying, no, the groups are more important, no, the individuals are more important. Neither are more important in that sense. But what we see in the world is either or. We see either extreme individualism or extreme groupism. And the error always is to drift toward collectivism. Atheism is usually collectivist. Some atheists are individualists, but when it's applied in society, every atheistic culture has always been collectivist. Why does that happen? Because atheists cannot, in their worldview, justify the sanctity of the individual. They have no basis for doing it. They borrow it from Christianity, but their own belief system does not support the sanctity of the individual. What's going to happen when essentially your core belief is not really support individuals? You just kind of think, well, that might be a good idea, but you don't really have the basis of it. What happens is the group will start to dominate. It's just the pressure of the group and the disregard for any one person, because really when it gets right down to it, they don't matter so much. What matters is the group mission. And so we see collectivism getting rid of individuals all the time, just getting them out of the way. So I'd really like you guys to think about this. I've come to these conclusions quite clearly in the last few weeks, and it's interesting. But this is my claim, that the Lord's Recovery actually aligns itself with collectivism, with leftism, with Islam. Now, when I say that the Lord's Recovery aligns itself with leftism and Islam, I don't mean that they believe all the same things. What I mean is they are using exactly the same strategy that those movements use in order to control people and take advantage of them. And by doing so, they are helping to create a populace that can't think for itself and thinks it needs to just go along with the group, and probably needs to keep its mouth shut if it's not echoing the beliefs of the group. In other words, it's creating people that can't push back against error. And both leftism and Islam are trying to eradicate Western civilization and replace it with something else. And it's actually Western civilization that gives us the freedom to practice our faith as Christians. These other cultures will compromise that. If you have freedom to practice your faith, it's because Christianity exists, because Christianity created Western civilization. We wouldn't have sanctity of the individual. We would not have the equality of individuals. We would not have helping the helpless. We would not have freedom of speech if Christianity hadn't come along. We would not. The Romans and the Greeks and the ancient Chinese didn't have anything like that. To them, it was all about power and position. I find it very ironic that the Lord's Recovery takes advantage of freedom of speech, which is a direct result of the church salting the earth and being the light of the world, and then they actually suppress free speech in their own ranks. So I really want you to think about this and just analyze it and maybe come to your own conclusions about it. But I think this is very interesting, and I think it's very important, and I think it's a dynamic we're going to see in the future going forward, very much being worked out in world history. Okay, so I appreciate you listening. I hope things are warming up where you are and you're getting ready for another spring. We'll see you next time. Take care.